Each of us is going to have 5 minutes to ask questions on the panel, and that's not nearly enough time. When I took a look at this issue, there are so many aspects to it and so many people affected by it. I hope we can at least open the discussion today. We certainly won't exhaust the subject by any means. Governor Baker, I'm going to start with you, but I'm going to ask the panel to listen to the question. Perhaps they'll want to give their own opinion. So we live at a time where a prospect, basketball, football prospect in high school could be lured with tens of thousands of dollars to a college to play a sport, perfectly legal. And that young man, in this example that I'm using here, may come from a family that has had no experience with any money at all in their lives, very modest family, just happened to have a star athlete in their household. He goes to the school, starts off on the basketball team, and at some point becomes quite a player of repute. Reaches out to many others to encourage them to follow him in sports. Comes a day when his college roommate says, "I need to talk to you before the next game. Between you and me, I'm going to ask you to do one thing, just one. I promise I'll never ask again. Miss the first 2 foul shots, and I'll never bother you again." And he says, "That's it? Just miss the first 2. You may do that already, but I need you to do that for me." He goes out in the game and is tempted by the possibility of doing that, thinking it's a rather harmless request, not knowing what's behind it all, and we can all guess what might be behind it all. At risk is not only that athlete and his future, if that's ever discovered, but the integrity of sports itself. Going back to 105 years ago in the Black Sox scandal, gambling and sports have been a lethal combination. Pete Rose is further evidence of that. So we're in a situation where college sports are now reaching a level of massive investments for NIL and other incentives to bring students to school or to put them in portals, move them to another school, and betting is on top of it. As a head of the NCAA, representing schools all across America, how do you view this phenomena?
Well, I certainly share your concern about what, in essence, is an example that involves a prop bet. And one of the reasons why we've been working hard to get all states to prohibit prop bets on college sports is, for example, for exactly the reason you just raised. I've actually talked to student athletes who have told me 100 versions of exactly the same story you just told me, which is the pressure that they feel, social pressure and other pressure from classmates, schoolmates, people they know, friends, people around the sports community, to do certain things that aren't going to affect the outcome of the game, but will absolutely help, quote unquote, somebody make their number. And that's part of the reason why, for us, this prop betting issue in particular is so fundamental. I mean, the example that you used about Armando Bacot having what he thought was a pretty good game in the tournament in which UNC actually won and getting more than 100 messages directed at him because he didn't get, quote unquote, enough rebounds. Those stories are everywhere. And I think one of the most fundamental opportunities that we have to take at least some of the pressure off a lot of these young people is to get prop bets out of the system. It's an enormous problem for them, and it creates an incredible amount of harassment, social pressure, and abuse, period.
So let me congratulate Senator Tillis for landing at his state university Bill Belichick, one of the legends.
I was going to bring that up.
One of the legends in football.
We're quite familiar with him in Massachusetts, yeah.
So this last week they published his contract in more detail than I think usually is disclosed, how much he's being paid and so forth, and the people he's going to hire to be part of his operation from the NFL. Interesting investment in talent for the university. And then the last item was $20 or $23 million that is going to be used for incentives to bring athletes to the university. This is a big money operation. I'm not so naive to believe University of North Carolina is unique in this situation. But with all this money coming in and gambling superimposed on top of it, how do we preserve anything that looks like a credible sporting event, let alone amateur-type athletics?
It's too bad that Senator Welch just left, because I was planning to congratulate him on the fact that University of Vermont won the D1 National Soccer Championship last night. About as amateur a team as you're going to find competing in Division One. I think the part of our objective on dealing with the money is this settlement that we've negotiated with a number of plaintiffs on a series of cases that typically involve NIL and other stuff that date back 10 years. And the point behind settling these cases was on our side to create structure around enhancing the benefits and the opportunities and the rev share for student athletes who play in programs and at schools that have really significant success in athletics. And I think that is ultimately, if we can succeed in getting this thing done. We got preliminary approval from the judge earlier this year, and she is going to have her final hearing on this in April. I do believe this will make it possible for us to create structure around this. And on some level, honestly, I think the fact that we could be in a position to put literally hundreds of millions of dollars directly into the hands of young people through their athletic performance and their schools will, in some respects, help on some of these larger issues associated with sports betting. But the abuse and the harassment and the beatdown, not to mention the social pressure that you talked about that they deal with right now in this space because of the prop bet element that's attached to this, is not going to go away unless we manage to figure out some way to get prop bets out of college sports. And that's why we've been spending so much time going state to state to make that happen.
Thank you, Governor. Before I turn to Senator Tillis, Mr. Batamose, a lot of people in Chicago are paying a lot of attention to Gonzaga graduates now. We think